Hey Ken, let's take a look at your week 3 assignment 2 drawing here. I think you've got a good object in place. Perspective is working out really well, and I think the texture variation is really working out well. I really like the glass texture that you have in place. Especially in the 2-point where I think the transition from the darker to the lighter and the shininess of the glass really comes across as very convincing for me. I think the perspective, and this is something you may want to think about as when you move to the next assignment, it works fine in the 1-point, but I think in the 2-point, while I think it's correct, I think it does tend to distort the object a little bit too much, and you might want to think about working in a viewpoint that may not be so overhead, but is maybe a little bit lower to the ground so that the object normalizes a little more. It's just such a kind of sharp angle, and it just kind of juts forward in a way that it doesn't feel realistic, even though I know it is correct. And that's just something that, once you see it on paper, you have to make those kinds of judgments, and I think you have the benefit of going into the next assignment with these drawings in place and kind of being able to see what's working and what's not. And for me, I don't think it creates a composition that is engaging. I almost like the 1-point perspective a little more because it comes across as a little more convincing in that respect. Not in, they're both, I think, convincing in terms of their texture and that sort of stuff. I think you can try and push the value variation a little bit more. I know you're trying to get a nice distinction between the top plane and the side plane and the front plane, but I think it needs to be more so. And it just depends on where your light is coming from and how it's hitting the objects. But I think we should be seeing at the very least a little bit of a darker shading area towards the back of the object. Or if you just want to do it in a very kind of simple way, which is fine, just kind of shade this one side a little bit darker than what it is so that it contrasts better with the other side. I can see some shading trying to go on here, but it just doesn't come across as distinct as it could, or as obvious, as it could. So that would be something to think about. I think edges also, one thing that's going to help kind of eliminate some of these little white gaps is once it all is said and done, just a little bit of a 80% or 60% gray line under here to create the kind of a shadow as it touches the ground plane is always helpful. It comes across as convincing, which is good, but it also covers up some of those edges if they don't quite kind of line up well. So we're seeing a lot of these little kind of white gaps around the edges of things, and at least on the ground plane it'll help to resolve some of those gaps by having a little bit of a darker value. I think also when you move to the next assignment and you're dealing with the environment, try to work with colors that are as realistic as you can get them to be within the environment that this object is in. I hope you don't have this kind of bright of a blue floor or this dark of a purple wall. If you do, I guess, but I think working in a more realistic situation will, I think, in the end kind of benefit the drawing. I think the colors to me feel they don't quite work that well together. The blue and the purple do, but not with the brown, which is more of a kind of a reddish base color, and it is contrasting in a way that I don't think quite works as well. Red and oranges and blues and purples don't quite link up as well as they could. So I think go with what's there. If your walls are white, leave them white. You're obviously going to have to use some gray in that. If your floor is carpeted, go with a beige, go with a golden color. But I think that'll help integrate everything a little bit better, and it'll just make things feel much more natural.